Social justice warrior net calls to cancel Canada Day draws mixed reaction, all because Saskatchewan First Nations announces discovery of 751 more unmarked graves near former residential school. This is the Great White North Report. Alright, so there have been findings of potential unmarked graves at former residential schools has led to the debate whether we should cancel Canada Day. No one where I work, and I work in a pretty big place, thinks that canceling Canada Day is a good idea. In fact, they're vehemently opposed to it. It's very few, a small minority of unemployed people with nothing better to do than wait while they wait for their CERB checks. These people need to get a life and realize there's not a country in this world that doesn't have some kind of shady things in their past, and yet they still celebrate their Independence Days and stuff. No country is a saint. Even the Indigenous tribes are not saints. They have fought one another and committed atrocities to their neighbors over the millennium. Look no further than the Iroquois. The Iroquois wiped out the Neutral, Petun, and Huron natives of southwestern Ontario. Took over their hunting lands, forced the survivors to flee to mostly Michigan, where they became the Wyandot. And the Iroquois are residing on stolen lands. The Iroquois that we have today, and the Mohawk and the Oneida, were not native. They're from upper New York State, and they came to Canada and were given lands by the British as a reward for faithful service during the American Revolution. So the Iroquois in southwestern Ontario are sitting on stolen lands themselves. No one says anything about that, though. But I regress. So, of course, this trends on social media. Social media is where all the nuts are, it seems. All the cancel culture, which is a poison to our country. Now, I understand that if Indigenous communities don't do that because they have a reason, a good reason, but for most Canadians, no. Especially for a lot of the Canadians that come from other countries, they know that this is a good place to live. Now, of course, because of the CCP Wuhan virus, a lot of Canada Day celebrations are going to be muted anyway. So why is this all of a sudden a big call to cancel Canada Day? Because of the Kamloops discovery and because Saskatchewan First Nations announced the discovery of 751 unmarked graves near a former residential school. CalWest's chief Cadmus Delorme made the announcement Thursday. Now, they were using ground-penetrating radar that had been used in Kamloops. It will be used in the future to aid the CalWest First Nation in locating more unmarked grave sites. This was the former Maryville Indian Residential School. It ran from 1899 to 1997. And children from First Nations in southeast Saskatchewan and southwestern Manitoba were sent to the school. Now, the First Nations took over the school cemetery from the Catholic Church in the 1970s, and they started using ground-penetrating radar to locate unmarked graves, and it's not immediately clear if all the remains are connected to the residential school. So this is not a mass grave site, Delorme said. This is your unmarked graves. Now, unmarked graves are nothing new, anywhere. Now, it's a tragedy if these were kids that died, but you have to remember, especially 1899, disease was rife. Many Indigenous communities already had tuberculosis. It was a common disease among Indigenous people before Europeans arrived. European arrival meant smallpox and measles, and also after World War I, you had the Spanish influenza. Even things like mumps could kill you back then. So remember, a lot of diseases, not to mention these residential schools, were not nice places to be, just like orphanages and work homes. For old people, the poorhouses, they were not nice places to be in. So you could do this same thing to any orphanage in Canada, any prison, cemetery, and any poorhouse, and find out how many bodies are in the ground there. I, for one, would like to see every residential school examined with this technology. Examine every residential school, find out exactly what's in the ground, then go through all the records of these schools, make it the federal government should be the one doing this with the Indigenous communities across Canada. Government to force the Catholic Church to give up their records, and that includes diaries. Many priests will make a diary or as a confessional, and let's see what's in there. It might paint a better picture. Now, unmarked graves aren't new. In my hometown, there's unmarked graves. This is a photo taken of it in 1967. The cemetery is roughly here in this field. If you look on Google Maps, That cemetery is right here. There are no markers there. And I didn't even know it was a cemetery when I was a kid. I learned that later in life. I know the Optimist Club was going to build a clubhouse there, but then someone told them that there's graves there. In fact, when they built this new house here, they actually dug up some graves and had to reinter them into this part of the cemetery. Now, why are there unmarked graves? Well, simply because cut stone was valuable. You go to any old cemetery and look at the oldest graves, and you'll see that this quality of stone wasn't what it is today. They're thinner, they're more rectangular, and you'd find a lot of them in chimneys or in foundations. The rumor in my hometown is that some of these tomb markers found their way into the basements of certain homes. Now, going back to an Indigenous community, you have to understand that they're not going to waste time with stone. Not necessarily. There are some stone markers on the grave. They're newer. But the oldest ones will not be stone. They'll be wood. Wooden crosses or wooden slabs that will deteriorate in weather and fall down. And of course you get people knocking them down. I heard the story there was in the 1960s that someone went and started destroying all their graves before they turned it over to the back to the Indigenous community, which is a shame. But is this a reason to cancel Canada Day? Not for most Canadians, no. For the Indigenous people, I understand. It's a hard point. They have a lot of reasons. So to cancel Canada, the vast majority of Canadians disagree. Like I said, my workplace, you can't find anyone who says that. If there are, it'd be the one odd nut. Because there are only 14% of Canadians back some move to eliminate the national holiday. Those 14% of the Canadians, unless they're Indigenous people, can get the hell out of our country then. Go somewhere else. Go find out what it's like to live in another country. I have lived in another country. I am a very proud Canadian. Yes, I know we've done some bad things. And definitely that should be part of our education system. I learned about it. Residential schools, but we weren't really told the full horror of it. But now we know. We studied Indigenous peoples in books. Aguhana was a book I read in public school. So we did learn about Indigenous culture, just not face to face. Now they do Indigenous culture more and more in high school. Now, it is Canada's worst historical crime, the residential school system and the Indigenous policy we had. But we can't keep going back to that and beating ourselves over the head. We need to find out, go through everything, all the records, find out the truth, what happened, and then do something about it. My idea is to make a monument in Ottawa with all the names of all the kids who died at those residential schools. Kind of like the Vietnam War Memorial they have in Washington. Then do the same thing in each province and territory for those kids who died in those provinces and territories at a provincial level at the provincial capitals, and then have also a marker at each individual residential school with the names of the kids who died there. So it's a top-down effect. The residential schools make it a field trip, like they do at Auschwitz, make it a necessity. But before I jump to conclusions, we have to know exactly how these kids died and get to the bottom of the truth. And for that, I'm quite prepared to cancel all Canadian foreign aid and use it to help the Indigenous peoples. That would be the best thing I could think of. We give $6 billion away to countries that don't deserve it. But our Indigenous people do deserve it, and we should help them fix up the water, especially the water supply in a few of them, and do whatever needs to be done. So I'm with Aaron Otoole on this one. Accuses activists of tearing down Canada after towns cancel Canada Day events. It's just like when they tore down the Sir John A. Macdonald statue in Kingston. It was just a small group of nuts from other communities, mainly Toronto, coming over to Kingston and causing problems. And the town council was afraid of what would happen if they said no. And it's the same thing here. We've given power to woke minority, small group of activist voices of continually taking down the country rather than acknowledging its many successes. Fully agree with him. These activists, waiting for their CERB checks, instead of going out and finding a job and making life better for themselves and everyone around them, want to cause problems in our country. I do not want Canada to become a mediocre country, because that's where we're going towards mediocrity. We have come a long way since those days. Remember, the residential school system was at first an idea put forward by both the Indigenous communities and the government. They just had different visions of how it should work. Now, Otoole goes on to say that he's proud to be Canadian, like most people are, like myself. We're not a perfect country. No one says we are. But there's no place on this planet whose history can withstand close scrutiny. The difference between acknowledging where we've fallen short and always tearing the country down. And unfortunately, the cancel culture is tearing the country down. And now no heroes will be sacred. I'm not in support of canceling Canada Day, but I do support what the Indigenous peoples are doing with their residential schools. Us First Nation have had access to the site since 1970. Why didn't they do an archaeological survey then? Why'd they leave it till now, 50 years? The onus is also on them to have done something at the time. So let's go through all these graves, go through all the records, and get this done with. Acknowledge this in a manner. As for canceling Canada Day, no way. Any Canadians out there, let me know what you guys think. Leave comments in the comment section, hit the like button, subscribe. And until next time, this has been the Great White North Report.